The reason why we have two names for this, Palm Sunday and the Sunday of the Passion, is because the Passion is so important. The death of Christ, that's what we're talking about, that's what we mean by the Passion. The death of Christ is so important that if people don't come to church on Good Friday, then they miss the Passion story. So it used to be that the Sunday before Easter was always just Palm Sunday. Palm Sunday is the celebration of Jesus' entry, and then if everybody comes to church the rest of those weeknight days during Holy Week, then you get the Maundy Thursday thing with the foot washing and the institution of the Lord's Supper, and then you get the Friday, the Good Friday stuff with the arrest and trial and crucifixion and burial of Jesus. But people didn't come to church, all that. So it's like, okay, so because of the fact that not everybody's going to be coming to church on Thursday and Friday, we got to make sure we get all of that in on this Sunday that we do the Palm Sunday. So that's the reason why on Palm Sunday, it starts out as Palm Sunday, but it ends up as Passion Sunday because it recognizes the fact that Jesus' death indeed has occurred, because not everybody's going to come to Good Friday services. And then, of course, Easter Sunday, the next Sunday, is the resurrection. So I'm just going to look at the gospel passages this week because the one for the Passion is so long, okay? But I do want to take a brief look at the Palm, the gospel reading for the Palms liturgy, and then I'll go to the liturgy, the Passion Gospel of Matthew. So I'm just doing the Gospels this week because they are so long. I'm going to go super long anyway. So the Liturgy of the Palms, the Gospel passage is Matthew 21, verses 1 to 11, okay? When they had come near Jerusalem and had reached Bethphage at the Mount of Olives, Jesus sent two disciples, saying to them, "Go into the village ahead of you, and immediately you will find a donkey tied and a colt with her. Untie them and bring them to me. If anyone says anything to you, just say this: the Lord needs them, and he will send them immediately." This took place to fulfill what had been spoken through the prophet, saying, now this is a quote from Zechariah. Notice they actually had been sent to pick up two animals, okay? Tell the daughter of Zion, look, your king is coming to you humble and mounted on a donkey and on a colt, the foal of a donkey. This is a little bit of a misquote of Zechariah. In Hebrew parallelism, they kind of repeat the same thing again. And what Matthew understood this as not necessarily repeating the same thing, but in addition to. So he puts the word and that's the reason why not only is there a donkey, but there's also a colt. Okay, and it makes clear that Jesus says, bring them, multiple animals, to him. Right, verse 6. The disciples went and did as Jesus had directed them. They brought the donkey and the colt and put their cloaks on them, and he sat on them. Yeah, singular, he sat on them. So I don't know how we're supposed to picture this in our head, but it definitely has Jesus coming in on two animals, right? A very large crowd spread their cloaks on the road, and others cut branches from the trees and spread them on the road. Notice Matthew's gospel doesn't say anything about palms. There's only one gospel that mentions palms on Palm Sunday, and that is John's gospel. In Luke, I believe it's still cloaks and branches, and I think in Mark as well. Cloaks and branches is what the synoptics give us. Palms are what we get from the fourth gospel of John. The crowds that went ahead of him and that followed were shouting, "Hosanna! to the Son of David. Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest heaven. The word Hosanna is a prayer. It's not hallelujah. Hallelujah means praise the Lord. Hosanna is Lord save us. It's literally a request. It's a prayer. It's a plea. It's some asking for something, right? When he entered Jerusalem, the whole city was in turmoil, asking, "Who is this?" The crowds were saying, "This is the prophet Jesus from Nazareth in Galilee." Bum, bum, bum. Yeah, so that's the end of the gospel reading there. But this is in the gospel timelines, the synoptic gospel timelines of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Jesus is only in Jerusalem once in his adult life, and that is when he goes there for the last week of his life. And that's the timeline that we have that determines the fact that we do Palm Sunday 7 days before Easter, because that's the synoptic gospels chronology, right? And I already told you why we do that with the with the Passion Sunday. Now, the people that are welcoming Jesus, okay? Notice it says the disciples were with Jesus. They brought the donkey and the colt. They put their cloaks on him, and a very large crowd spread their cloaks on the road. Assuming these are not people with Jesus, but in the other Gospels, it seems like they are just the ones with Jesus. It's not the people who are already in front, but the people who are following with. The crowds that went ahead of him and that followed were shouting. Okay, so it's like apparently there was some sort of a movement afoot, right, with regard to his entrance. Now, the big question is, what was the attitude of the people when they said this? Did they really see Jesus as the kind of Messiah that he had declared himself to be, or was he was there a mistaken expectation with regard to how he was going to be? Did they see him because of this thing, Hosanna to the Son of David? Is this a recognition of expectation with regard to a military kind of a presence? Now, the coming in on a donkey is not the donkey was a royal beast of burden. This is one of the things we've got to remember. One of the reasons why people might recognize him as king, as son of David, is that he was riding the royal beast of burden. The royal beast of burden is a donkey. So we don't want to sentimentalize the donkey. Oh, isn't that cute? It's so humble. Well, you know what? Maybe it's just royal. One of the emphases we have in the Gospel of Matthew is that, and we had this from the very beginning with regard to his birth and the three magi that came from the east, was that this is the king of this is Israel has produced the king that God has in mind for the whole world, okay, not just for Israel, okay? And so there's a backhanded kind of a recognition here on the part of the people that are welcoming him, but yet they really don't have the full grasp of what it is that Jesus is up to, okay? Now, let's skip over to the gospel, the Passion Gospel, okay, that starts in chapter 26. What happens there from chapter 21, 22, 23, Jesus does some teachings in the temple. There were some verbal sparring going on. Jesus, at some point, there's a Matthew puts Jesus' teachings in 5 segments. Okay, 5 very important, because remember, one of the things that Matthew has always done with regard to Jesus is present him as like a Moses. Okay, and the Pentateuch, and the Sermon on the Mount was the first of the 5 segments of Jesus' teaching. And then in this segment, we get his final and 5th time one. And there's actually a little parable of the end times and such. Then we get to chapter 26. Our reading starts in verse 14. But at the beginning of chapter 26, it says that when Jesus had finished saying all these things, that's when we know, oh, the teaching is done. This is when everything's going to go down. And in Matthew, he puts this next thing, the next thing that happens. Well, first of all, it says that you know that after 2 days, the Passover is coming, and the Son of Man will be handed over to be crucified. This is Jesus giving a little foregleam of, okay, we're about ready to start. That's about to go down. But then we get the thing about the chief priests and the elders, like saying, oh, we need to get this, we need to stop this guy, but we don't want to do it around a crowd. Yeah, that sets the background for everything. Then Jesus is at a town in Bethany. His feet get anointed, and he's saying, oh, this woman has prepared me for my burial. And then we have what happens next. Then one of the 12, who was called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, what will you give me if I betray him to you? Now remember, Judas has only been mentioned once before in the gospel, and that was in the list of the disciples. And there's always a little tagline in that list, Judas Iscariot, the one who betrayed him. Okay, this is the way the tradition comes to us. They paid him 30 pieces of silver, and from that moment he began to look for an opportunity to betray him. It really had to have been very unknown facial-wise. I mean, for them to be willing to pay meant they really had no clue what he looked like. And I don't know why that is. Maybe we're just so used to, in a world of social media and photography and such, that we always like, people talk about like, oh, I know faces but not names. Well, back then nobody ever said that, because faces weren't, you had to see the face to know the face, right? So people ask, well, what's Judas' motivation? Why is he doing this? Is it money? Is it one of the popular beliefs? And I think if you look at the musical Jesus Christ Superstar, in that Judas is frustrated. He wants Jesus to do more. He wants Jesus to be a little bit more militaristic. It's possible that's behind his motivation. He might be he's not understanding. It's clear that he's not understanding what Jesus is about, even though he is one of the disciples. But yet, is it possible that maybe he was trying to force Jesus' hand? It's like, well, maybe if we put him in a tough spot, his real power will just boom show itself, and then the revolution is on and such. And it could be that was it, but all that's just our own speculation. Matthew certainly doesn't give us any clue, does he? On the first day of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus saying, where do you want us to make the preparations for you to eat the Passover? The Passover was that meal that they for this festival, right? He said, go into the city to a certain man and say to him. Now, this sounds a little bit familiar, does it not? Because that's what on the entrance to Jerusalem, that's what it looked like he was saying as well. Go in, there's going to be somebody there, and we don't know if it's somebody he's known before. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. We don't know, but Anyway, go into the city to a certain man and say to him, the teacher says, my time is near. I will keep the Passover at your house with my disciples. Notice the very lordly way of saying it. It's like, oh, he's saying he's going to do this at your place. And we know that he's going to comply because of the fact that we've heard the story, right? Well, get this. So the disciples did as Jesus had directed them, and they prepared the Passover meal. So we know that this is the beginning of the Last Supper, which is a Passover. And the Passover meal has a very distinct flow. There's certain things in it, elements of it. And if you're familiar with that, you recognize it when Jesus does certain things during this meal. When it was evening, he took his place with the 12. Now, there's no table, okay? The word for table isn't even here. It's just like he took his place with the 12. It doesn't say they took a place. They would eat common meals at the tables, but if it was like a festival type of a thing, they would use the Greek/Roman style where they would be reclining on couches and such. And it wasn't so, and it's because it was a dragged out kind of a thing. It wasn't just the idea of eat, and then go on to the next thing. It was an event in and of itself. So there was like, they would eat in a reclining posture, right? When it was evening, he took his place with the 12, and while they were eating, he said, truly, I tell you, one of you will betray me. And they became greatly distressed and began to say to him, one after another, surely not I, Lord. Notice it says one after the other. He answered, like a cacophony almost, right? He answered, the one who has dipped his hand into the bowl with me will betray me. There is a time in the Seder meal, the Passover meal, where you'll dip a vegetable into the salt water, and it reminds you of the bitter tears and such. This is an element of that supper that he's referring to. The Son of Man goes as it is written of him, but woe to that one by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. So Jesus is recognizing that, hey, what goes down is something that's got to go down the way it goes down. It can't go any other way. It's got to go this way. And this is his recognition. This is again, we see him in this kingly posture, right? Woe to that one who does that thing. It's kind of like it's just in the cards, okay? Judas, who betrayed him, it has not yet, said, surely not I, Rabbi. He replied, you have said so. The way of Jesus responding where he doesn't specifically confirm what they say, but yet he turns it back to them. It's like he's makes their word, he's using their words against them. It's like he's saying to them, you have already told on yourself, okay? While they were eating, Jesus took a loaf of bread. And now notice it doesn't say anything about Judas leaving, Judas getting up. It just has that interaction, okay? It doesn't say that he's left the supper, which is a little bit different than what we have in some of the other Gospels. While they were eating, Jesus took a loaf of bread, and after blessing it, he broke it, gave it to his disciples, and said, now, in the Seder meal, the Passover meal, there is this bread that represents the Exodus, the fact that, we had to leave so soon that we didn't have a time to allow the bread to rise. And so the bread represented that Exodus moment, and yet Jesus is reinterpreting it using that which happens to him as the key. Take, eat, this is my body. There's a new Exodus. And Jesus' body actually is becoming that thing that provides the release from the slavery of sin This is how the gospel is presented. Then he took a cup, and after giving thanks to them, he gave it to them, saying, now, there were like 3 or 4, I think 4 cups of wine involved in the Seder process. And this is probably the first or second of them. And it's supposed to represent the reddish color of the wine is supposed to represent the blood that was put on the Passover posts, the posts that the angel of death would make. Then, we'll buy you past this house because they have that. So I think it's important that the wine that we use always be red, that there be red. The key is the color, okay? Then he took a cup, and after giving thanks to them, he said, drink from it, all of you, for this is my blood. That's why we want to, of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will never drink of this fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom. Yeah, so this last little thing, we don't know, he's probably referring to the end time, right? A lot of times the eschatological end is metaphorically described as a big feast, and that's probably what he's referring to here. Verse 30, when they had sung the hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. The hymn, that's how the Seder's got finished, right? The Mount of Olives is right across, right across from the temple. You can actually look down on the Temple Mount and on Jerusalem from the Mount of Olives. Remember, they had been somewhere, we don't know, probably in Jerusalem, maybe on the outskirts. When they had sung the hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. Then Jesus said to them, you will all become deserters because of me this night, for it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. Now, that is a quote of a psalm, and notice the first person nature of it. I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. It's the idea, it's like Jesus is that shepherd, right? And it says, though, it's saying God will do this. That's in Jesus' mind, okay, this is his, remember this quotation is always intended to solidify what it is that he's saying and doing. It's like, this is the way it's got to be, okay? He recognizes that. And we know that he can't necessarily, we still haven't been to the Gethsemane incident, right? But stay tuned. But after I am raised up, I will go ahead of you to Galilee. Peter said to him, though all become deserters because of you, I will never desert you. And we know that in reality, not only does Peter desert them, but everybody else does too, okay? Except for the women. Jesus said to him, truly, I tell you, this very night before the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times. Peter said to him, even though I must die with you, I will not deny you. And so said all the disciples, yeah. So they had no idea how real things were going to get, okay? So that's the reason why when they were willing to say this, that's why they weren't necessarily they just weren't fully aware of what it was going to take, okay? This is not that uncommon, remember? We saw the disciples do this when Jesus said, are you able to drink from the cup that I am? And they said, oh, yes, we are. No, they weren't. But it just shows sometimes we don't really know what's involved or we may surprise ourselves in not being willing to go through what we think we can. Then Jesus went with them to a place called Gethsemane. And when you walk from down the Mount of Olives and to Jerusalem, there's a garden on the way, and it's Gethsemane. And the place we've been on our pilgrimages there, I say ours because some people in Nativity have gone with me. There are trees there, they say, that could be as old as, old enough to have been there when Jesus and his disciples were. And he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." He took with him Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, that's James and John, and began to be grieved and agitated. Notice it doesn't say anything about what he's getting grieved and agitated about. Remember, all of this angst of Jesus. He's been presented as very kingly, very like in charge, and like this has got to happen, this has got to happen, this has got to happen, and then there becomes like he gets a little edgy. Okay, I believe that this is a manifestation of that opportune time that Satan said might become. There could be a little bit of unease, okay, and it might have to do with that. Matthew doesn't say that. He doesn't say anything about the devil or temptation in this, but yet we can kind of sense it, that there's something. I mean, he began to be grieved and agitated. It could have been something like that. Then he said to them, "I am deeply grieved, even to death. Remain here and remain awake with me, and stay awake with me." And going a little farther, he threw himself to the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Yet not what I want, but what you want." This is the first time we actually hear this prayer. And it's like Jesus is like, this agitation gets described in a prayer of like, oh, this is what it is. It's like he's starting to realize what is going to happen and go down. And you kind of, and if you think about the things that we know that he's going to suffer, it's like, yeah, we're not surprised that he would get this way, right? Then he came to the disciples and found them sleeping. And he said to Peter, "So could you not stay awake with me 1 hour? Stay awake and pray that you may not come into the time of trial. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." Notice one of the things that we do in the Lord's Prayer when he taught them to pray was to ask the Lord to not save us from the time of trial. Okay, bring me not into temptation. Okay, yeah, this is the thing that this is the word trial and temptation. Scholars differ on how it should be translated, and it seems to make a lot of difference to a lot of people, but yet in reality it's the same word. So we need to consider this when we use the word temptation, the trial, to be tried. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. Verse 42, again he went away for the second time and prayed, "My Father, if this cannot pass unless I drink it, your will be done." So we have another it's like he's moving a little closer to acceptance, but still he's saying, "Your will be done." He said that actually in the first time too. Again, he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were heavy. So leaving them again, he went away and prayed for the third time, saying the same words. We don't get it narrated for us this time. Then he came to the disciples and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and taking your rest? See, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Get up, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand." And now we see him stepping back into that kingly way. We don't see the retracting into the more human side of Jesus when he's with people. We see that more when he's off by himself and it's just him praying, right? Now, in this next section, we see Jesus getting delivered up. So while he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. With him was a large crowd with swords and clubs from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now the betrayer had given them a sign, saying, "The one I will kiss is the man. Arrest him." At once he came up to Jesus and said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and kissed him. Jesus said to him, "Friend, do what you are here to do." Then they came and laid hands on Jesus and arrested him. Now, Jesus' words to Judas basically announced to, okay, let's do this. Are we doing this? We're doing this, aren't we? Let's do this. Yeah, we know what you said. Do what you came to do. We know what we're going to do here. So let's just do it, okay? The kiss is the ironic thing. This is something that you would not normally do unless it was somebody. It's a greeting of affection, something you'd use for a nobleman, that kind of a thing. And here the irony is that it's used as a sign of recognition. That apparently they didn't have any clue that any clue what he looked like whatsoever. So they needed this kind of a sign. Yeah. Then Jesus said to him, suddenly one of those with Jesus put his hand on his sword, drew it, and struck the slave of the high priest, cutting off his ear. And then Jesus said to him, put your sword back into its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Now, this is Jesus. We don't have the names of the people, like John will give us the names of people, and we'll actually have the re-healing of the ear in another gospel, but not in this one. This is a little message of nonviolence that Jesus is saying that, hey, this isn't how it's going to go down. Okay, this has got to happen, and it's not going to be as though we're fighting to save our lives. That's not what this is about. So again, this is a very kingly, very kind of a thing to do, right? Do you think that I cannot appeal to my Father and he will at once send me more than 12 legions of angels? Doesn't this harken back to the temptation in the desert that we saw with Satan, and the idea that, oh, he could have actually, the throw yourself off the temple and angels will come and rescue you. Won't that happen? Well, yeah, it would, but that's not the Messiah I'm going to be. So here he is still recognizing that, and I think that shows us that the temptation, the fact that he would even say that, I think means the temptation was still there. I'm not saying Jesus wasn't resolute. I'm just saying that this is due to the fact that that was present at the beginning, and he resisted it. It shows that he resisted it. Jesus' temptations didn't end all the way to the end. The temptations kept coming. The temptation wasn't just a one-time deal. It kept coming, and it kept coming, and it kept coming, and it came in the Garden of Gethsemane, and it comes once again here in his saying this. But how then would the scriptures be fulfilled, which say it must happen this way? At that hour, Jesus said to the crowds, have you come out with swords and clubs to arrest me as though I were a bandit? That word bandit is a word that was used by historians of the time to refer to those revolutionaries who were would steal and rob from people in order to support their cause. Day after day, I sat in the temple teaching, and you did not arrest me. But all this has taken place so that the scriptures of the prophets may be fulfilled. Then all the disciples deserted him and fled. So there we have the final, like, okay, now he's alone, right? He said that would happen, and now it does. So in saying that the scriptures and the prophets may be fulfilled, we don't know what scriptures he's specifically referring to, because it may be he's got the suffering servant in mind. The idea, a bruised reed he will not break, and he won't even blow out a flickering wick. It could refer to that kind of thing where he has referenced before. Verse 57, those who had arrested Jesus took him to Caiaphas, the high priest, in whose house the scribes and the elders had gathered. But Peter was following him at a distance, as far as the courtyard of the high priest. And going inside, he sat with the guards in order to see how this would end. Now, the chief priests and the whole council were looking for false testimony against Jesus so that they might put him to death. But they found none, though many false witnesses came forward. So this is interesting that there was evidence. They were looking for false testimony, which meant to say, oh, that means they knew that there wasn't really anything, but yet they wanted to hear somebody say something that they could use, and it didn't happen. At last, two came forward and said, this fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and to build it in 3 days. The high priest stood up and said, have you no answer? What is it that they testify against you? But Jesus was silent. Now, Jesus' silence here is intended to show that in his resolution toward accepting what would happen, that he knew that slick words weren't going to get him out of it. He knew that there was no way he was going to talk himself out of this. It just wasn't going to happen. And so when we see silence, I think what we get there is Jesus' resoluteness, is that a word? Toward the way it was going to go down. Then the high priest said to him, I put you under oath before the living God. Tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God. Jesus said to him, you have said so. Notice this again. This is that same kind of a thing that he said to Judas, where he said, you have said so. It's the exact same words. It's like, well, you said it. It puts the onus of it on the speaker, that they're the ones who unwittingly have spoken the truth. Okay, and this is the way that Jesus is presented. That it's not Jesus isn't put to death because of anything that he has said, but because of everything that he has done. And it adds up to them recognizing who he is, and you can either handle it or you can't. Okay? Jesus said to him, you have said so. But I tell you, from now on you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. This little quotation he's making here indeed is a circumlocution for a way of saying, I am this guy. And he's not saying it in the words, he's just quoting the scripture. And that's the reason why the reaction comes from the high priest. He's basically Jesus is saying, I am all of that. Okay? And how do we know? Because of the reaction in verse 65. Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, he has blasphemed. Why do we still need witnesses? We have now heard his blasphemy. What is your verdict? And they answered, he deserves death. This was according to the Levitical law. Then they spat on his face and struck him, and some slapped him, saying, prophesy to us, you Messiah. Who is it that struck you? So it's like they didn't obviously believe that he was, but this is a part of that mockery that Jesus said would happen. Now, Peter was sitting outside in the courtyard. A servant girl came to him and said, you were with Jesus the Galilean. You were also with Jesus the Galilean. I saw you. But he denied it before all of them, saying, I do not know what you're talking about. When he went out to the porch, another servant girl saw him, and she said to the bystanders, this man was with Jesus of Nazareth. Again, he denied it with an oath. I do not know the man. After a little while, the bystanders came up and said to Peter, certainly you are also one of them, for your accent betrays you. Then he began to curse, and he swore an oath. I do not know the man. This is very strong. Where it says he swore an oath, it's actually in the word, and the real word of what he's saying is cursing, which is what you won't do if you're a real Christian after the Holy Spirit has been given. There's no blasphemy against the Holy Spirit in the Gospels until after the ascension. But certainly you're also for your accent. And then he began to curse, and that's what he like to curse Jesus. Jesus be a, that kind of thing. You can't be a follower if you're going to say something like that. And this is why Peter's denials were so huge. Okay, I do not know the man. At that moment, the cock crowed. Then Peter remembered what Jesus had said, before the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times. And he went out and wept bitterly. Bum, bum, bum. When morning came, all the chief priests. So if the cock crowed 3 times, what does that mean? Does that tell us what time it was? I don't know. I'd never thought about that. Maybe that's what happens when, is it the cock-a-doodle-doo of the morning like we hear on the farms? I don't know, maybe. When morning came, all the chief priests and the elders of the people conferred together against Jesus in order to bring about his death. They bound him, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate, the governor. So the scene changes from the Jewish realm to the Roman realm. They handed him over to Pilate. When Judas, his betrayer, saw that Jesus was condemned, he repented. So this is why we sometimes think that, what happened there was he was expecting Jesus to do something that would have demonstrated his power, and maybe a whirlwind would come in and take all the bad guys away, and Jesus, I think he was trying to force something, and it just didn't transpire. And it's like, and due to the fact that this is the time that he repents, to repent means to change your mind. It means that it didn't work. His old plan didn't work. And he wanted to abort. Saw that Jesus was, he repented and brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders. And he said, I have sinned by betraying innocent blood. But they said, what is that to us? See to it yourself. It's like that. Colloquially, they're basically saying, hey, that's on you, dude, okay? That's on you. That's all you. Throwing down the pieces of silver in the temple, he departed, and he went and hanged himself. Regret. That's what we got here. Regret. Regret will have you do some very violent things to yourself. Yeah, regret. But the chief priests, taking the pieces of silver, said, it is not lawful to put money into the treasury, since they are blood money. After conferring together, they used them to buy the potter's field as a place to bury foreigners. So they were literally left holding the bag. So even though Judas played that role in it, I think Judas represents that follower of Jesus that doesn't quite really get Jesus, drawn to Jesus, loves Jesus, doesn't truly understand Jesus totally. There's a lot of that going on in Christianity today. I believe that it is rampant, and it's sad, and I don't have time to go into that, but I don't think that Judas has disappeared. The spirit of Judas is alive and well in many churches in our nation. I don't believe that exists in the Episcopal Church, though. I do believe that it is alive and well, though, in general. After conferring together, they used them to buy the potter's field. Yeah, okay. For this reason, the field has been called the field of blood to this day. Then was fulfilled what had been spoken through the prophet Jeremiah. Remember, Matthew is big on scripture fulfillment. And this is a little conflation of Jeremiah, and I think something from Isaiah as well, where it says, and they took the 30 pieces of silver, the price of the one on whom a price had been set, on whom some of the people of Israel had set a price, and they gave them for the potter's field as the Lord commanded me. How many times have we seen Matthew cite something to say, oh, this just fulfills exactly. We don't have that same hermeneutic. We wouldn't necessarily see that and read it and think like, this is referring to Jesus, so much as the way they read it is like, oh, you see those words? See how that fits? That's what they would do. They wouldn't ask the question of like, oh, what do the words mean in the original context? What do they mean in the original book of Jeremiah? Didn't mean that. They didn't care about that. Now, Jesus stood before the governor. This is Pilate. And the governor asked him, are you the king of the Jews? We know eventually that the symbol above his thing is going to say, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. That's what INRI stands for. Are you the king of the Jews? Are you the king of the Jews? And Jesus said, you say so. You said it. You said it. This is not a denial. This is definitely an affirmation. But for a Gentile to say King of the Jews, it's the same thing as saying, are you the king of Israel? So you are a king. But when he was accused by the chief priests and elders, he did not answer. So remember that he hadn't, but now he does. Then Pilate said to him, do you not hear how many accusations they make against you? But he gave him no answer, not even to a single charge, so that the governor was greatly amazed. This is the last time, I believe, that we actually hear anything from Jesus until on the cross. Now, at the festival of the governor was the governor was accustomed to release a prisoner for the crowd, anyone whom they wanted. At that time, they had a notorious prisoner called Jesus Barabbas. Jesus was a common name. A lot of people were called Jesus back then. That's the reason why we have Jesus of Nazareth, right? Jesus Barabbas, right? So after they had gathered, Pilate said to them, whom do you want me to release for you? Jesus Barabbas or Jesus who is called the Messiah? Jesus who is called the Christ. This Jesus Barabbas. So you got your choices of Jesuses here. What's the Jesus that what's the Jesus you want to die, and what's the Jesus you want to live? For he realized that it was out of jealousy that they had handed him over. We don't really have any historical attestation for the fact that this was actually a practice. So we don't know the historical veracity of any of this, but I like the story because of the fact that it puts the crowd in the position of choosing. Which Jesus do you want? Remember, he had just been welcomed into the city, and everybody was praising him. And now what's going on? They're rejecting him. Just the opposite of what happened on Palm Sunday, right? For he realized that it was out of jealousy that they had handed him over. While he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent word to him. Get this. Have nothing to do with that innocent man, for today I have suffered a great deal because of a dream about him. Remember how big dreams, a big role that dreams play in Matthew's gospel. In Matthew's gospel, there were, and early on, remember, Joseph had those dreams about what, no, don't divorce this woman, take her as your child. The wise men had a dream that told them to go back to where they came from a different way instead of actually going through Jerusalem to report back to Herod. So dreams amongst the Gentiles are very key in our gospel of Matthew in communicating God's thoughts, okay? And that's all we see about it. She's like, but it's the last little dream reference we have in Matthew. Now the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowds to ask for Barabbas and to have Jesus killed. The governor again said to them, which of the two do you want me to release for you? And they said, Barabbas. And Pilate said to them, then what should I do with Jesus who is called the Messiah? Do you want that Jesus? What do you want me to do with this Jesus? He's the one who's called the Anointed. All of them said, let him be crucified. Let him be crucified. Yes. Then he asked, why? What evil has he done? But they shouted all the more, "Let him be crucified! Let him be crucified!" We have a different thing in Mark. Mark's it says, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" Not crucify him, but crucify him. Remember, they were given a choice. Him, not him. Him. Yeah. So, when Pilate saw that he could do nothing, but rather that a riot was beginning. See, and one of the things about Pilate is he just wants to make sure that things don't get out of hand. That's the key. As long he doesn't really care about guilt or innocence, he just doesn't want things to get out of hand. But rather that a riot was beginning, he took some water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, "I am innocent of this man's blood. See to it that yourselves." This is his way of saying, of washing responsibility. He is responsible. He could have done something, but he didn't act in a way that he did not want the people to get even more upset, because he was in a tenuous spot and he didn't want to endanger that, right? Then the people as a whole answered, "His blood be on us and on our children." This is not a justification for saying that, oh, everything that the bad has happened to the Jews since then, they had it coming to them because of this. No, that's not the way we're supposed to read this. This is just merely a way for us to understand that they're saying that Jesus' own people, Jesus' own family, Jesus' own religion, they are the ones who crucified him. This isn't trying to say something evil about Judaism or Jews, just that it's those people who we are closest to that can do the most harm to us. Okay, this is the way it was for Jesus. Okay, then so he released Barabbas for them, and after flogging Jesus, he handed him over to be crucified. We don't get any narration of the flogging, thank goodness, but if you want to see what it probably looks like, go view Mel Gibson's Passion of the Christ, right? Then the soldiers and the governor took Jesus into the governor's headquarters, and they gathered the whole cohort around him. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him. Now, the scarlet robe, Roman soldiers had that red thing that they draped themselves with. That's probably what they used here. And after twisting some thorns into a crown, they put it on his head. Remember, a lot of times the Gentiles unwittingly are giving Jesus exactly, are treating him unwittingly. Like, does he deserve a crown? Yes. Is he a king? Yes. And so this is kind of like they're trying to mock Jesus, but in their actions, they're mocking themselves, okay? They didn't realize how much truth there was in what they were doing. They put a reed in his right hand and knelt before him and mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews." Yeah, they're not Jewish, so why would they care if they said that, right? But the irony is he is the king, and they will eventually recognize him as king, spoiler alert. But here is that scene of mocking and the suffering, the indignities that Jesus predicted. They spat on him and took the reed and struck him on the head. And after mocking him, they stripped him of the robe and put his own clothes on him. Yeah, and then they led him away to crucify him. As they went out, they came upon a man from Cyrene named Simon. They compelled this man to carry his cross. Remember, there were a lot of people in town for the festivities, and so this man got pressed in the service, yes? And when they came to a place called Golgotha, which means place of a skull, they offered him wine to drink mixed with gall, but when he tasted it, he would not drink it. That's because this was an insulting thing. It was like some sort of a thing to numb the pain. And it's basically an insult and a mockery. It's just a continuation of the mockery. And when they had crucified him, notice it doesn't say anything about what that looks like, what it sounded like, we know what it meant with regard to nails and stuff. And if you watch different movies, you'll see different interpretations of how did that really work? Did they just put it right over the hand? Did they put, was it on the wrist? Was it something with a board? Were there ropes? Was there something to hold up the body? All those things get answered in those questions, in those scenes, in those in all of those Jesus movies, right? And when they had crucified him, they divided his clothes among themselves by casting lots. This is something they typically did. It was not unusual for them to do with a condemned man, and he's not going to need him, so let's see who wins a lottery. Then they sat down there and kept watch over him. Over his head they put the charge against him, which read, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." And traditionally it's come as I-N-R-I. I is the first word in Latin for Judaism, for first letter for Jesus' name, Jesus, so from Nazareth, Jesus, Nazareon, okay, Jesus of Nazareth, R-I, King, the R, that's like when you have the Roy, R-Ra, like we have in the French, King of the Jews, Iudaeum, okay, of the Jewry, okay, that every time there's a letter J, the letter I is what you'll see in the Latin. So that's what the I-N-R-I stands for. That's what, when it says Jesus, King of the Jews. All right. That's the thing he was accused of. That's the thing that he said. So essentially, his it is the death sentence. Oh, he said he was the king of these people, and there is no king but the emperor. So therefore, that's his charge. Then 2 bandits were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by derided him, shaking their heads and saying, "You who would destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself if you are the Son of God. Come down from the cross." It's like, because it was clear that he had claimed to be this, right? Another temptation. This is another temptation, okay? In the same way, the chief priests also, along with the scribes and elders, were mocking him, saying, "He saved others, he cannot save himself. He is the King of Israel. Let him come down from the cross now, and we will believe in him." It's as though the temptation for Jesus to be this wonder-working Messiah never, ever let up, okay? He trusts in God. Let God deliver him now if he wants to. For he said, "I am God's son." The bandits who were crucified with him also taunted him in the same way. Yeah, the taunting never stopped. The temptation in the midst of the taunting never stopped, okay? This is one of the things I think is key about recognizing the temptation and passion of Christ, is that the temptation never stopped with the wilderness experience before Jesus' baptism. It continues all the way to the end. From noon on, darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m. And about 3 o'clock, Jesus cried with a loud voice, "Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani." That's an Aramaic expression. And so the writer gives us a translation. That is, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of the bystanders heard it, they said, "This man is calling for Elijah," because Eliyahu, it would sound like he's beginning to say the name Elijah. This is how that could be mistaken. At once, one of them ran and got a sponge, filled it with sour wine, put it on a stick, and gave it to him to drink. Notice that it doesn't say Jesus refused that, so we don't really know. Apparently this is an attempt to say it. Let's see if we can. They're trying to extend his life so that. Because they say, well, but wait, let's see whether Elijah will come and save him. So it's like, maybe if we keep him alive a little longer, maybe we'll actually see Elijah show up. So it's like a little bit of oh, well, maybe that is what's going to happen. So that could be a motivation for the sour wine. Then Jesus cried again with a loud voice and breathed his last. So those words are the first thing he said since Jesus said, "You say so," as opposed in front of Pilate when he said, "You are the King of the Jews," right? At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. Notice it doesn't tell us which curtain, just the curtain in the temple. There are a couple of curtains, but the bottom line is the meaning of this is like God provides the interpretation of the meaning of this death. And it is that there's no more separation. There's no more ethnic, God doesn't have a pet people anymore. There's no, it's like the way of salvation is open to everyone. And this is what's very clear with this temple reference. The earth shook and the rocks were split. Again, actions of God. This is all Matthew's mentioning of this is basically his way of saying that God was in all of this. And it's not that God was angry, it's just that God was in it. God was manifesting there, that this wasn't just something that happened as a random thing. The tombs also were open, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. And after his resurrection, they came out of the tombs and entered the holy city and appeared to many. Notice it says after the resurrection. So Jesus' death has an effect on the entire, one of those things we say is like in the older version of the Nicene Creed, it's like he descended to hell, or is that the Apostles' Creed? He descended to hell. Why does he descend to hell? To release them. That's the part of, that's what we get here. The idea here is that the final resurrection, Jesus' death portend, and his own resurrection portends what's in store for us as well. Now, when the centurion and those with him who were keeping watch over Jesus saw the earthquake and what took place, they were terrified and said, "Truly, this man was God's son." So here we have a recognition that again, from Gentiles. Remember, we already had that at the very beginning of Matthew's gospel with the coming of the Magi from the east. That they recognize this as a king, and now we have this like a bookend type of a confirmation. Many women were there also, looking on from a distance. They had followed Jesus from Galilee and provided for him. Notice it says from a distance. Among them were Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James and Joseph. That's probably Jesus' mother too. I don't know why it says it that way, but Jesus had brothers named James and Joseph. And the mother of the sons of Zebedee. We don't ever get her name. I think it's Luke mentions a woman by the name of Salome. Maybe that's her name. When it was evening, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who was also a disciple of Jesus. Now, Jesus had many disciples that weren't necessarily a part of the 12, okay? But notice it mentions him being rich, and this story is intended to show how Jesus' appeal was not just to the downtrodden, but also to people who were quite successful in life, right? He went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Then Pilate ordered it to be given to him, and he does. This is not an unusual. A lot of times, what the Romans would do with the bodies from crucifixions is they would just dig a ditch and they just put the bodies in it and they'd cover it up. But we do have historical, archaeological evidence for that there were sometimes family tombs, okay, and especially amongst those who were better off, okay, they would have their own. Well, that's what we got going on here. So Joseph took the body and wrapped it in a clean linen cloth. The emphasis on clean. Notice that also, and laid it in his own new tomb, which he had hewn in the rock. The emphasis is on the fact that he obviously was a true disciple, and that he felt like Jesus was deserving of this kind of treatment. Very much a testimony to his faith, right? He then rolled a great stone to the door of the tomb and went away. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were there, sitting opposite the tomb. So they saw all this. That sets the stage for the Easter, right? Now, the next day, that is, after the day of preparation, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered before Pilate and said, "Sir, we remember what that impostor said while he was still alive. After 3 days, I will rise again. Therefore, command the tomb to be made secure until the third day. Otherwise, his disciples may go and steal him away and tell the people, he has been raised from the dead. And the last deception would be worse than the first." So Pilate isn't really all that concerned about this, but this must have been a real type of a fear on the part of the Jews. It might have been a real type of a thing that got said in that time, and Matthew's audience is aware of it. Pilate said to them, "You have a guard of soldiers. Go, make it as secure as you can." It's like Jesus. He's like, "I'm not giving any of my detail. You got people. You tend to it. I'm not doing that." So they went with the guard and made the tomb secure by sealing the stone. Yeah, so that's where our reading ends, and we're set up for the resurrection appearance, are we not? Yeah, I knew I was going to go this long, 66 minutes, and I'm not going to deal with any of the other readings, but I know on this day we rarely get a sermon. The Passion Gospel speaks for itself. I hope so. There's a whole lot more that can be said about this, but I don't have time to get into it all. But it's really fun to compare the differences between the Gospels, because you start to get a feel for what each writer was trying to emphasize and what they didn't feel was as important, and things that they felt of more importance. Anyway, blessings on your Holy Week. Until next time, peace.